It's Eagles playoff time. Welcome to Wicked Wolf here on Chestnut Street in Philly. We've got a lot of Eagles fans here. Eagles fans, can we hear some excitement for playoff week? All right. People are still trying to figure out if the Eagles can win this game at Tampa Bay. Welcome, everybody, to the Eagles Playoffs live Q&A presented by Toyota, proud partner of the Philadelphia Eagles and the official automotive partner of the NFL. We've got a bunch of Eagles fans here. It's going to be a great night, and we have an esteemed panel right here, very esteemed panel, to talk about the Birds playoff game going down to Tampa Bay. First of all, I'm John Clark. This is the legendary, the Hall of Famer, Ray Didinger in the house. We've got suits versus golf shirts, which is good. Dave Zangaro, Reuben Frank, great writers for CSN Philly and NBC Sports Philadelphia, and they have a great podcast, by the way. I have people that listen to it around the country who say, I keep up with the Birds with Reuben and Dave. So welcome, guys.
You have a pretty good podcast yourself, by the way.
Thank you. And Ray has a tremendous book that is available out there for Birds fans. Ray, what's the title once again?
The title is One Last Read, and it's a collection of my favorite stories from my 30 years in journalism. So if anybody wants to go to the bookstore, you can find it on the shelf.
I thought it was about Andy Reid's last season.
That'd
One
be a
Last
downer.
Read? Spelled differently.
2012
That'd be a
Eagles
downer.
book.
That'd be a downer. So, guys, before we jump into all the things about the matchup, first of all, about the injury situation. And Eagles fans, you got to be concerned because A.J. Brown did not practice today. Don't know if it's a MCL sprain of the knee. Don't know if it's a hyperextended knee exactly. Does anybody know definitively what it is?
Not definitively.
Not definitively. No. But
knee.
Big concern. How concerned are you now that he did not practice today?
Yeah, I think it's a big concern. I mean, this offense without him in it, not ideal. And then Devontae Smith is going to play, but we know his ankle is still a little banged up from getting hurt in Week 17. So you add all that on top of Jalen Hurts with the finger. Yeah, it's a little concerning.
And the Jalen Hurts finger. You have covered the NFL for over 50 years, and Rube, you've covered for 30, 35, more. When a quarterback, 40, well, you look younger, see? When a quarterback injures his finger like that, and you saw it, it was mangled. It came out, popped out, it's dislocated finger, and it hurt even more on Monday. Hadn't thrown up until today. And we honestly don't even know how much he threw because he was limited. How concerning is that for the quarterback?
It's very concerning, and he didn't do anything to alleviate that concern. He said it's progressing, which I guess is encouraging a little bit, but he said he shouldn't have gone back in the game. He said he made a mistake going back. He's a competitor. He wanted to be out there, but you could tell it was really bothering him, and that's the concern, is that he won't be able to grip the football. I don't know how much better that can get in 8 days, but if Jalen is not close to 100%, they don't have a chance. They just don't have a chance. You're not going to win this game without Jalen making plays with his arm or with his hand. So how much better it can get by Monday, I don't know, but it better get a lot better.
So hearing all this, Ray, what would your game plan be going back down to Tampa Bay against the Bucs?
Well, you hope that he's going to be available, and you hope that he's going to be able to play and be somewhat close to 100%. You certainly hope that A.J. Brown will be out there, too. You're going to be getting Devontae Smith will be coming back. That helps. DeAndre Swift is coming back. That will going to help. But you're going to need. You can't win this game. I think Reuben's right. You can't win this game if Jalen Hurts is playing significantly below 100%. I mean, he's going to have to be able to throw the ball because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers aren't great. But one thing they do is they defend the run pretty well. They're number 5 run defense in the league. So you're going to have to throw the ball. You're going to have to make some plays through the air. And you're going to have a somewhat healthy quarterback to be able to do that.
Now, the blueprint that the Eagles put out there, when they were rolling good, I mean, arguably, the win over Tampa Bay, the win over Miami Dolphins, would you agree those were probably their best wins? I mean,
Rams, Vikings, but yeah, those two.
Rams, yeah.
Certainly.
Chiefs are in there.
Yeah.
As far as complete games.
There
haven't been a whole lot of them.
Yeah. As far as complete games.
They
the Chiefs
outgained the Bucs by 300 yards that day. Seems like a long time ago.
Seems like a very long time ago, but they ran the ball 40 times for over 200 yards, controlled the clock. With the injury situation with A.J. Brown, do you want to see them go down there? And I saw a fan out here. They've got the shirt that's circulating around Philadelphia. Run the ball. Would you like to see that as the main focus of the game plan?
Well, I don't think you win a lot of games if running the ball is your main focus, especially against that defense. What are they, 29th against the pass and third against the run? But yeah, I mean, you got to mix it in. And look, if there's a light box, they have good running backs, but it's going to depend on what the Bucs are doing and what's working. They haven't run the ball consistently well the second half of the season. I mean, they have 211 yards that first Tampa game?
201.
201. They're not that team anymore for whatever reason. If they can get production out of Gainwell and Swift and they're getting 5, 6, 7, 8 yards a pop, yeah, do it. But it's a good run. That's a good front. It's a good run defense, and I just think they're going to have to make plays in the air as well.
If we say run the ball one more time, Barrett's going to magically appear like a genie.
I think one of the things that they're going to have to do is, and Reuben mentioned the word, and I think this is the key, is the balance. I think you have to have a balanced offense where you're doing a little bit of both, because one of the things that the Eagles have had a lot of problems with, and particularly last Sunday, is picking up the blitz. The team blitzes you, and you absolutely know that Todd Bowles loves to blitz. So that's what you're going to be facing down there. And so you're going to have to protect your quarterback, and one of the ways you can protect your quarterback is making that defense aware of the fact that, hey, they might run the ball in this play. So it'll make that blitz back off a little bit, and you're going to have to protect your quarterback, and having a balanced offense and I'm not saying run the ball 45 times, because I know that's not going to happen, but run the ball well enough that you can make them rethink the blitz, because otherwise they're going to be coming full blitz on every single snap.
Yeah, and you guys saw what happened last week. Wink Martindale, he dials them up, and the Eagles did not handle it well at all. And they haven't handled the blitz this year like they handled it last year. Are you confident, because they're coming off that game against the Giants and a heavy blitz team, that they'll figure it out going down to Tampa Bay?
No. I think it's a big problem in this game. We saw Todd Bowles in that first matchup in Week 3. Even though the Eagles won that game, he blitzed 75% of Jalen Hurts' dropbacks. So he's going to send some heat after him. And it's not just one answer to this. They have to find any answers to this. When earlier in the year, what they kept trying to do was like running back screen, get horizontal, which is one answer, but there has to be more built into this offense to try to combat that. They need more blitz beaters and Jalen at times, like, it feels like how many times we watched him this year, it's sprint right, throw the ball out of bounds. Like, that's their answer, and that can't be the only answer in this offense. And at times they've taken a shot here or there. I think you have to do that to keep a team honest, but I think it's partially Jalen, but I think it's a lot of the coaching staff. They have to give him some better answers. He hasn't had them.
What's interesting?
I'm sorry, I was going to say, I asked Jalen about that today. Does he like being blitzed? Because a lot of quarterbacks, it's an opportunity for a big play. They want to be blitzed. They want that opportunity to hit a big play, to find the hot, to get it to him in motion and make a big play. And he said, you have to feel that way. You have to want it. You embrace it. But he just hasn't been good against it.
It's interesting because you wonder if it is coaching or if it's the quarterback. And Dallas Goedert, this week on WIP, said something very interesting. He said he felt they did have the answers for most of the plays, but they didn't recognize the blitz or read where it was coming from. So wouldn't that be on the quarterback more so than the coaching if the coaching has provided answers?
Well, there have to be outlets and there have to be things built into the play design that give the quarterback those options. And when you go back and you look at the last couple games, especially the game against the Giants, they just weren't there. I mean, against that blitz, they were calling an awful lot of vertical routes. And there are situations where there's nowhere to go with the ball. Typically, the way most teams will combat the blitz is they'll throw a lot of hot routes. They'll throw a lot of sight adjusts. If the receivers know that the blitz is coming, they'll cut their route off short and give the quarterback an easy, quick throw to get the ball out of his hands. Those weren't really there. So as a result, you wound up with Jalen sort of running around, and as Dave said, sort of running and trying to throw the ball away. It just wasn't a very smart way of attacking the blitz. Well, you're going to get it this week for sure, because there's no other way Todd Bowles knows how to play, and you better have a better plan to deal with it, or you're going to have the same kind of game you had Sunday.
The confounding thing, too, is they have guys who should be really good at this. You have A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown's slant should be there all day. You have Devontae Smith, who can line up anywhere. You have Dallas Goedert, one of the better tight ends in the league. They should have these answers, and they don't. And it's a little scary to think about them going back to Tampa Bay a couple years later. And if that's what bounces them from the playoffs again, that will be a disaster.
Yeah, and it was a disaster last week against the Giants. They were just porous against the blitz.
One of the things that you're going to see for sure is one of the better players on the Tampa Bay defense is Antoine Winfield, who's a really, really good player. I don't know how he didn't make the Pro Bowl. He certainly should have.
He got at least one All-Pro vote.
Yours? He's such a good player. He's 130 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. He had 6 sacks. But one of the things that he does very effectively is he runs what's called a delayed blitz, where you don't realize he's coming until all of a sudden he's coming. And he's really good at finding the lane, and he's really good at timing it and getting on top of the quarterback. And he's a guy that's kind of the key to that whole blitz thing working. And these are guys the Eagles are going to have to. I certainly hope that in their meetings this week they're accounting for him, because he's the kind of guy that can make a couple of big plays that'll turn the tide of the whole game.
Yeah, that is one of the biggest concerns going down to Tampa Bay for this playoff game. We've got some Eagles fans here. You can also, if you're watching this online or on YouTube, you can ask questions on there. We will get them to our experts right here. But Ashley is out here at Wicked Wolf, and she's got our first fan question sponsored by Dunkin.
Yeah, guys, our first fan question comes from Bobby in Wynwood. All right, Bobby, let him have it.
Back when Jalen had the bone bruise in Week 10, why wasn't there a more concerted effort to use DeAndre Swift and the other running backs? Especially because DeAndre was absolutely rolling at the time.
Run the ball theme, right? Run the ball theme.
Yeah. How much did Barrett pay you to ask that? Well, I mean, I think the Eagles are ninth in the league in rushing attempts. I mean, they do run the ball, and that includes Jalen's, obviously, although he didn't run it as much this year. I mean, that's not how these coaches think these days. I mean, it's a passing league. The teams that win generally are the teams that throw well and make plays in the air. And I think everybody from Nick to Howie to Jeff Lurie believes in throwing the ball to win. And, I mean, DeAndre Swift did have 1,000 yards this year. He had a good year, very good year, averaged 4.6, I think. You're not going to score many touchdowns when your quarterback has 15, but, it's just not what they do.
My biggest problem with the run game this year is, they used to be so good at their 4-minute offense. When they needed to have it, they would rely on their offensive line. They would pick up yards. They would run clock. And when they've needed it this year, it hasn't really been there. And that was kind of a staple, really, for the first year and a half, or after that beginning stretch of Nick Sirianni in 2021. That became something that they could hang their hat on. You had this great offensive line. You have running backs who will at least pick up some yardage, and then you keep moving the clock, and it worked for them. You move the chains, you run the clock. They haven't been able to do that. Their 4-minute offense this year has not been nearly as good, and that's a little concerning because they have no reason to not be good in that area.
All right, so we've talked about the offense, the injury concerns, and the concern facing Todd Bowles and the blitz. Now, defensively, my goodness, there are a lot of concerns to go over. And once again, we'll start with an injury. Reed Blankenship didn't practice today. And if I add them all up, Sidney Brown is now out for the year, unfortunately. So when you look at...
They're loaded at safety. They're so deep there.
Okay.
Got a healthy Mekhi Garner, a healthy Tristan McCollum.
Yeah, I mean, they may ask you to jump in there. I mean, if
Quentin Michaels, was seen at the NovaCare today.
Boy, we're going back in the day now. So if Reed Blankenship can't go, how do you think they line up? And they're already having issues in the secondary, as you can see.
They don't have many options. I mean, Dave likes the idea of, and I don't think it's a bad idea, of giving Avonte Maddox some safety snaps. He's done it before. He's done okay at it. I think he's still kind of shaking off the rust, though. He didn't play for 3 months, but you don't have a lot of choices. Just not a lot of options.
If it comes down to Tristan McCollum or Avonte Maddox on the field, I think that's a good option. And I've always kind of liked Avonte as a safety. Now he's getting the rust off, and he hasn't looked great since he's been back here. But I like the idea of pushing him back to safety. Then you have a couple of slot options, whether it's Bradley Roby or Eli Ricks. You're just trying to get your 5 best defensive backs out there. So that's what I would do. It's not ideal, certainly, in a playoff game to say, hey, by the way, Avonte, I know you've only been back a couple weeks. Now you're playing a different position.
Yeah, and Ray, in all your years in the NFL, have you ever seen a 10-1 team? Okay, you lose a couple after that, but that changed. Well, I'm saying when they made the change of coordinator.
Right.
So you're 10-1, you lose a couple in a row.
10-3.
10-3, and then you make the change to Matt Patricia and Sean Desai. Very awkward. He wasn't fired. He is still around, but he's really not involved with the play calling of the game. How much effect do you think that has had on the defense and the communication and guys knowing where they need to be and the responsibilities they have?
Well, it certainly hasn't made things any better.
Yeah.
And certainly, we can start by saying that. It hasn't improved the situation. And what you've got is the players that you've got, especially in the linebacker and the defensive backfield, just aren't that good. I mean, it's just simply put, they just aren't that good. And so that talent deficiency still exists, but now you've added to it a level of confusion and uncertainty with a new guy calling the plays. So you've taken a situation that wasn't very good in the beginning, and you've made it worse. So if you're talking about trying to win this game on Monday night, your linebackers and your defensive backs aren't going to do it for you. Okay? If you're going to win this game, you're going to have to win it up front. You're going to have to win it with your defensive line, which is where your best players are. And frankly, one of the things that's really been most discouraging in this losing streak is how the defensive line really has not risen to the challenge. I mean, if they're going to win this game, you're going to need those guys to get pressure on Baker Mayfield and force him into making some mistakes, which he's capable of doing. Because you're not going to get those plays from the back of your defense. You're going to have to get them up front.
So when you look at it, and I've read Rube's articles over the past, I believe, 7 weeks, and still haven't seen Josh Sweat get that sack. 7 weeks without a sack. Hassan Reddick, 4 weeks without a sack. To me, that's shocking. And like you said, that is where the defense is going to win, at the line of scrimmage. Do you have any reason for the lack of pass rush?
I think a lot of it has to do, I mean, all those guys that you mentioned played more snaps. I mean, Reddick's played more snaps in Arizona when he was a linebacker, but they played a lot of snaps. Certainly more. Reddick's played a lot more than last year. Sweat played more than he's ever played. Fletch played like it was 2018. He's still going strong. He hasn't seemed to drop off, but Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis seem to wear down. I think the whole group is worn down. And that shouldn't happen. I mean, Jordan Davis and Jalen Hurts are young guys. They played a lot more games than they played at Georgia, but they just haven't produced the second half of the season. Sweat's kind of a mystery because he's been a consistent guy. Pro Bowl 2 years ago, 11 sacks last year, got off to a good start this year, and he's just disappeared. That's one of the bigger mysteries on the team. Reddick hasn't had the same year as last year. I think the rotation is a lot shorter than it was last year. Nolan Smith's been disappointing. He hasn't produced. BG snaps are down because he's 35. You don't have Hargrave. You traded Derek Barnett. So they traded, who's the guy they traded early in the season?
Contavious Street.
Contavious Street. I knew he'd pull that right out. But there's a lot fewer guys in the rotation than there were last year and even the start of this year, and I think it's costing them.
Yeah, last year they had the 70 sacks, which is unbelievable up there with the Chicago Bears. But now
edge rushers don't have a sack the last 4 games.
That's crazy.
So Matt Patricia has never coached an edge rusher to a sack.
Wow, and you can read all that in Rube's observations every
Sure,
single week.
every
It is
week.
in there. And we have more fan questions presented by Dunkin. Let's go back to Ashley with some not only in person, but we have some online as well. Ashley.
Yeah, so we got another in-person question, guys. This one comes from Larry from Nicetown.
Yes, I'd like to know how come the Eagles don't run wheel routes? Teams run them against us, but we seem to even do it at all.
Yeah, that's a good question. The wheel route. It's something, you're right, we saw Saquon Barkley last week. It was everyone in the stadium knew it was coming except the Eagles. They were still trying to communicate and get their defense
And was
set
that Nick
up.
Morrow pushing off or saying, hey, somebody else has to take him?
Communicating through the snap. He didn't have his mouth guard in yet because they're trying to get the play in. It's a good question. I think in general they haven't been as good throwing to their backs as you'd expect. They have DeAndre Swift, who we saw him in training camp. He was lining up with the receivers. He has those kind of hands. Kenny Gainwell has that ability. Boston Scott has that ability, and Rashad Penny doesn't play, so he doesn't really count. But yeah, they should be better at it. I think that it doesn't really fit into what this offense is, and I think that is a problem because the best offenses kind of cater to the strengths of their personnel, and that's one area where they haven't really done it.
Yeah, good question. And we have another fan question. Ashley, are you still with us over there? Ashley, I believe there's another fan question presented by Duncan from online. Am I right?
So many excited fans. All right, our next one comes from Ben from North Philly.
What should the Eagles do with Bradbury and Slay next year? Because they're terrible on defense.
Slay hasn't been terrible. I think he's had a decent season. He's a better than average corner. He's not the Slay of a few years ago, but I'll still take him. You can't get rid of both those guys because of the cap. But I think Bradbury, I think they're going to have to eat some cap and move him. He lost a step with cornerbacks. And I remember my first year covering the Eagles, there was a corner who had made the Pro Bowl once named Roynell Young, who Ray remembers well. And he was a really good player. And then one day he just couldn't run anymore. And he couldn't cover anybody. And cornerbacks, if you lose half a step, you go from James Bradbury of last year to James Bradbury of this year. I don't think you can carry him for another year. I don't care what. And the cap hit is significant, but not prohibitive. So I don't think he'll be here, but I think Slay will. I think Slay's been fine.
So when you line up to face the Tampa Bay Bucs offense, Mike Evans, are you going with obviously Slay at one spot? We saw Keely Ringo get some time. Are you going with Bradbury on the outside, or could Bradbury possibly be in the slot if Mike Evans is in the slot. How are you arranging your defensive backs, your cornerbacks on Monday night?
It's a good question. It's a good question. I mean, because Godwin will probably be in the slot. That's where they use him mostly. And you're going to have to account for him. I mean, Mike Evans is their home run hitter. And I would assume that Slay will probably draw him most of the time.
But he'll go inside too.
Yeah.
And is Slay going to follow him? Probably not.
Yeah, but I think that
Would you put Bradbury on him in the slot?
you would certainly, you would probably think about it. Because if you do, because you're so thin at safety, you're going to have to somehow find answers at safety too. And I think they may wind up doing what Dave and Reuben were talking about, which is putting Maddox back there, which is not ideal, but you're kind of backed into that kind of a situation. Okay, if that's the case, then somebody else is going to have to play the slot, and it's going to have to somebody that can run with Godwin, and then they're going to motion Evans, and that's why I said that the pass rush is key, because if Baker Mayfield has time, if he has any time in the pocket, I mean, I don't like the matchup of those receivers against the Eagles secondary even a little bit.
Wow. So we've talked about a lot of the concerns, and we've got some Eagles fans here. Give me a reason, each of you guys, why you believe the Eagles can go down to Tampa Bay and beat a 9-8 Bucs team. It's probably the best draw we've all been talking about, probably the best draw they could have gotten in the NFC playoffs. Give me a reason why the Eagles will go down there and win. Let's start with you, Rube.
Why they will win?
Yes.
Well, I mean, on paper, they're a better team. And, maybe being in the playoffs will wake some guys up. There's a lot at stake here. They've got good players, on both sides of the ball. And, I mean, assuming, Devontae, we don't know about AJ. I think AJ will probably try to play. But they've got good players. And Tampa's not a great team. I mean, Tampa's a 9-8 team. They've beaten, I believe, one winning team.
I think they're 2-7 against
Packers and
Packers. There was one other
and maybe
team.
the Seahawks got to 9-8 maybe, but they haven't beaten a team with 10 wins. Eagles are 5-2 against winning teams. I mean, they lose to bad teams, or they beat bad teams, but they lose to bad teams and beat good teams. Is what I'm trying to say. But they've beaten some really good teams. Tampa hasn't, so there's that. They're a good road team. I'm scrambling here. I want to leave something for Dave, but I don't feel super confident.
They're good on Monday nights.
They are.
Oh, they're used to it. They've gotten a lot of practice this year.
They're the first team in NFL history to play 4 road Monday night games in a season.
Yeah, and I feel it every time I take my 7 a.m. flight back. I will say that Rube's right. They're a more talented team. You look, it's amazing that we're even having these discussions. When you look at the roster side by side, it shouldn't be close. The fact that it is really troubling. I'll give you one other reason. Their quarterback's really banged up. We're talking about Jalen Hurts and his finger. I mean, Baker Mayfield barely could get through the game last week. He didn't practice, or it was listed as a non-participant on Wednesday. Or on Thursday, on an NFL Wednesday. I don't have a lot of confidence that the Eagles are going to get to him, but if he's affected by that could really change the game.
And let's not forget, they only put up 3 field goals, 9 points against the Carolina Panthers in a game where they won the division.
In a game to win the division.
So,
exactly.
I mean, really, where is their offense right now?
Yeah, it's nowhere. It really isn't. They can't run the ball. They can't run the ball. They don't even really try to run the ball. It's all about the offense. And Baker Mayfield this year had the best year of his career. I mean, for a guy that's bounced around, I mean, he threw for 4,000 yards for the first time. He had a really good year. But right now, I mean, anybody that watched that game last Sunday, he could barely get on and off the field. I mean, they're saying his ribs are bruised. I guarantee you they're broken. Okay, and he's playing on a sprained ankle. And that doesn't get better in 1 week's time. So he's going to be, we're all worried about Jalen's physical condition. Their quarterback has physical condition that's at least as much of a problem. You ask, why would you be optimistic? I'll just second what these guys said. On paper, the Eagles are a better team. On paper, the Eagles are a better team. The one, and I really believe this, that if the Eagles don't turn the ball over in this game, if they don't do the giveaway takeaway thing, they'll win. Okay, but part of the reason that the Buccaneers are where they are right now is they have been very good at it. The Buccaneers are +8 giveaway takeaway this year. The Eagles are -10. And the Eagles can't win that kind of a game. If they get sloppy, if they get stupid in this game, they could hand this one over to the Bucs.
And they do that every week.
And they do it every week.
And they've won 20 straight. Eagles have won 20 straight games when they're +1 or better in turnover ratio, turnover margin. The problem is getting to that +1. Can't get there.
Yeah. At a certain point, you kind of are what you are in that category.
And there were a bunch of games earlier in the year where the Eagles were squeaking by. They were winning even though they would lose the turnover battle by 2 or something like that. We're going to keep on that topic in a second, but we have another fan question virtually. Let's go back to Ashley. This is presented by Dunkin.
All right, guys. Our next question comes from Ari Lewis on Facebook, and he wants to know, why is the D front so Jekyll and Hyde? They've looked terrible the last few weeks.
Well, they're more. Which one's the bad one, Jekyll or Hyde? They're more of that. Whatever one is bad. They've been more of that recently.
Lots of Jekyll, not much Hyde.
Yeah, whatever is worse, they've been that.
I don't know which is worse. I don't know that.
I don't know either. I can't tell you. I was talking.
Anybody know that?
We're putting you on assignment, Rube. Figure out.
Jekyll is the bad guy.
Yeah?
Hyde is
Jekyll.
the good guy.
Okay,
yeah.
so they're more
Dr.
Jekyll than Hyde, definitely. I will say that I talked to some players in the locker room today, and there's going to be a concerted effort this week to simplify, which, duh. I mean, they need to, because guys don't know where to line up. They don't know the play call. They don't know their assignments. You have to simplify. And I think we can all agree that changing coordinators midstream was a bad idea. So now you're just trying to minimize the damage of that and try to get back to just letting these guys play quicker and letting them not have to overthink every little thing. That's the only option you have here, and that's what they're going to try to do this week.
And by the way, Tom Feiner is telling me in my ear that Hyde is the bad guy.
Oh.
So there you go. Okay. That's our research staff getting on it right away. Dave, that is such an interesting thing, because I didn't have much confidence about this team going into this week. And then you go into the locker room and you talk to guys. And, BG, he's always optimistic. And he says he senses, sense of urgency this week. Fletcher Cox said, you just see a renewed focus, playoff week. And, you heard Dallas Goedert say, once we clinched the division, okay, we were just looking forward to the playoffs. Like, we went to the Super Bowl last year. We were looking forward to the playoffs this year, got through the regular season. Do you think that you can flip a switch in the NFL from a lousy end to the regular season going into the playoffs? I'll start with you.
No, there is no switch.
No? Can't flip a switch?
I don't believe it. I don't believe that. I think that if you looked at this Eagles team, which seems silly to say considering they were 10-1 at one point, but if you looked at the way they played, I think Reuben said it earlier in the show, is there wasn't any time that I felt like in those other weeks that they played a really solid four-quarter game where they were just really good from the opening kickoff all the way through. There were always things within the game that you just wish they could be better at. And I thought Jason Kelsey, almost after every game, Kelsey would say, yeah, we won, but we've got a lot of stuff to clean up. He said that pretty much every week. So when all of a sudden they got to that really brutal part of their schedule and they got San Francisco, Dallas back-to-back, and they got whumped. And they really haven't recovered from that, it seems to me. Now, the idea that you've got a fresh start now, you're in the postseason, hopefully that'll give you a little inspiration and all of those things. Could that be a factor? Yeah, it possibly could. But the fact is, at 10-1, they were not the dominant 10-1 team that you would typically see. They were a 10-1 team that had issues, and those issues have visited them in a big way down the stretch.
Yeah, I think at 10-1 they had one of the worst point differentials ever for a 10-1 team. Go ahead. Do you think that you can flip?
Where
a
did
switch?
you see that stat? No, I don't either. I was
Rube's
going to say,
observations?
it never occurred to me, and I haven't read. I guess Robert Louis Stevenson wrote Jekyll and Hyde. It's the same person. And it's just a different manifestation of the same person. He was a doctor in England and the evil side.
This is what I deal with on our podcast.
Wow.
It's just, this is all he's been thinking about
We're
since we
going
did
off
this.
the rails now.
Dr.
Yeah.
Jekyll was this normal physician who was this amiable fellow, and then he would turn evil at
So,
night.
John, now it's your turn.
Okay.
You got to try to reel
So,
him back
Rube,
in a little bit.
And what you're saying is Jekyll and Hyde, the Eagles can get back to being
Yeah.
a 10-1 team since they're the same person?
Yeah.
Is that where we're going
I
back to?
think, there's a parallel there.
The problem is the 10-1 team wasn't that good either. Really. I mean, and Ray's right. There's no switch to flip. If there was a switch to flip, it would be flipped. They would have done it already. They needed these games. They had a chance to win out against the Cardinals and the Giants to get the number 2 seed in the NFC, and they didn't do it. So if you don't flip the switch there, it doesn't exist.
Anytime a coach says, we know how to win, or we're not playing great, but we know how to win, it's not a good sign. That means they're going to start losing soon.
Yeah. Yeah,
And they have.
It's pretty wild because you do look at the talent and you look at the pass rushers and you look at the talent they have. Is there something else? Is there a disconnect in the locker room? Is there a disconnect between the coaches and the players? Obviously, there was something going on with Sean Desai and the defense. And I don't think any decision is ever made without the leadership council and the veterans and the captains talking to the man who made that decision, whether it's Nick Sirianni or above Nick Sirianni. So do you think there is a disconnect in the locker room and the coaches?
I don't sense that. And one thing I noticed, like in the Seattle game, the first Giants game, and the Arizona game, I mean, they didn't give up a touchdown in the first half in any of those 3 games. They allowed 4 field goals in those 3 games. If Nick Sirianni had lost the team, wouldn't they play poorly from the get-go?
I'm not saying lost the team, but what I'm saying
Well,
is
but
the defense obviously didn't believe in Sean Desai and what he was calling, right?
I don't know that. I think Ray hit it on the head. They're just not that good. I mean, their safeties, their corners, and their linebackers are just not very good.
Yeah,
and I think we're seeing that.
But last year and in the Super Bowl year, the pass rush covered up a lot of things. And that is what drives the defense. We're not seeing that. That's, to me,
I
that
agree.
might be the most disappointing thing about this Eagles team.
There's no question.
Is the lack of the pass rush, because that's where a lot of the money is, and that's where the defense has to win. So, to me, I still can't explain it. Maybe Josh Sweat is hurting. Maybe he's worn down. But I don't get Hassan Reddick and his drop-off.
Yeah, I think the most disappointing areas of this team are where the expectations were really high. So you start on defense, they put all the money and the resources into the defensive line. They're not living up to that. In a way, I've been almost as discouraged by the offense because this whole way they built this team, they knew they had deficiencies on defense, and they were kind of banking on having an elite offense to carry them, and this offense hasn't been that. It's been stagnant. It has not been elite, and it needs to be. There's no reason for it not to be. And that's kind of, I know the defense deserves a lot of the blame. They've clearly been the worst of the 2 sides of the football, but there were higher expectations for the offense. This is an offense with the best offensive line in football, 2 of the best receivers in football, a quarterback who was an MVP candidate, and a running back who just rushed for 1,000 yards, and a tight end who's top 5. Tell me why they're not better. Top 10, they should roll out of bed and be top 10, and they are. They should be top 3, and they're not.
And they've been relatively healthy, where the defense has had a ton of injuries, especially in the back 7. So I'm with Dave on that. I think the defense has been worse, but the offense has been more disappointing.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with it 100%. I mean, coming into the season, I had the same feeling I think that these guys had, that they're going to have some issues on defense. You're probably going to have 5 new starters. I thought that losing Gardner Johnson was going to be that was going to hurt him. You know, I don't know if people realize how well he played last year. I mean, this team, they don't take the ball away from the other team very much.
Yeah.
I mean, and he had 6 interceptions last year, so that was a big loss. T.J. Edwards, who not a superstar but a pretty good solid player, you lost him.
Huge loss.
So
Javon Hargrave was huge as well. The push he had up in the middle, was unbelievable. And I don't know if they've recreated that. I think Jalen Carter's done well, Fletcher's done well, but obviously they probably couldn't pay him and try to take care of everybody else. But that's a huge loss too.
But to your point of your question, I felt coming in there were going to be issues on defense. I really felt that coming into the season. But I thought that the offense was going to be so good. I mean, I thought this was going to be the highest scoring offense in football because you're bringing back all the same guys. The only real change was Miles Sanders leaves and DeAndre Swift comes in, which to me is actually kind of an upgrade. So I thought this offense was going to be dynamic. And I thought it would make up for all the problems you're going to have on defense early in the year. And by the end of the year, kind of work it all together. And right now, you'd really be hitting your stride. And the defense proved to be worse than we thought. And the offense wasn't nearly as good as we thought it was going to be. And I think, and these guys can talk to it probably even a little more than I can because they're around all the time. But I think the loss of Shane Steichen was a big, big loss.
Yeah.
I thought he was. I think people saw when he went to Indianapolis this year just how good a coach he was.
Yeah, they've missed him. And I'll be honest, there's a quote from Nick Sirianni that kind of has been ringing in my head a little bit the last few weeks. It was a Nick Sirianni press conference, and he basically said, we're doing the same thing like we did last year, which isn't good. I mean, you have to be innovative. You can't do what you did last year because defenses are going to catch up, and it's all about trying to figure out your next move. This is a chess match, right? You can't just expect to run it back and do the same thing you did last year, and defenses play you the same way, and we've seen that. We've seen defenses adjust, and that secondary adjustment hasn't been there from this coaching staff. And I think if they had Shane Steichen, maybe that would be a little bit of a smoother adjustment, but we haven't seen it. I think Brian Johnson has had some growing pains, certainly. But I also think a lot of this is on Nick. It's his offense, his game plan throughout the week, and I think, quite frankly, they haven't had good enough game plans going into Sundays.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions. It is playoff week, though. The Eagles are going down to Tampa Bay
really uplifting,
against
isn't
the winning. I mean, really, it's kind of all we talk about is the concerns, but they do have a shot here. This is probably the best draw they could have gotten in the NFC. So let's go out right now to our fan cam, our Birds cam, presented by Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL. We do have some excited Eagles fans out there. They are ready. They are ready for playoff football. And I'll tell you one thing that's interesting. They are going on the road And they do have the best road winning percentage under Nick Sirianni since he became the head coach, best in the NFL. And Darius Slay in the locker room today, he said it with a smile. Slay, you're right, Slay, big play Slay, said, hey, maybe it's good we're going on the road because they are quick to boo here in Philly, and, hey, we don't need the boos. So do you think in any way it does help going away, going down to Tampa Bay? Fletcher Cox said there's far fewer distractions when you're playing on the road in the playoffs. Do you think in any way that helps?
I mean, they lost to Arizona at home, so getting away from the link can't be a bad thing. I think there might be something to that. Just get away from all the distractions and the fans and just go play football. We'll see. I mean, I think they're kind of they're like searching right now.
Sure.
They're searching for any
We are too.
positive, but it can't hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Do you think it's
yeah, I think it can. I think a team feels like, and this is one of the things that they're probably trying among themselves to some degree, a circle the wagons kind of feeling. Everybody's against us. Nobody thinks we can win.
Us against the world.
It's us against the world, which
Philly against everybody.
As tired as that is, it actually works more often than it probably should. So you got that going for you, and you go away, and it's like nobody's rooting for us, nobody believes in us, et cetera, et cetera. And I've never felt, and I haven't been in the new stadium, okay? I've never been in the new stadium down there, but I've never felt that Tampa Bay was a particularly hostile place to go.
Wait. When you say new stadium, just for me, what year are we talking? How long has this Raymond James been around?
Been a while.
25 years.
Wow. Okay.
The last time I was there, it was still the Sombrero. So
Wow.
that's been a while.
I never
but
experienced
but
it.
it never struck me that Tampa Bay is a
98.
particularly
25
hostile
years.
place. Is a particularly hostile place,
No, you're right.
or a huge home field advantage
saw
for the
Eagles-
Buccaneers.
Eagles
And you
fans took it
probably
over.
have a bunch of Eagles fans there anyway. So yeah, I mean, for all of those reasons, that's why I thought this was a really good draw for the Eagles. And so it's a very beatable opponent, and you got to play them on the road. But it's not a place where I felt like they had a particularly great home field advantage.
You're right. It's not like you're going out to Lambeau. It's not like you're going out to play Kansas City. You saw that crowd this year.
There's going to be a lot of Eagles fans.
There's going to be, and there's always a lot of Eagles fans in Tampa, that whole area, because of the Phillies, having their spring training there in Clearwater across the causeway. There's always a lot of Philadelphia people in Tampa.
Yeah.
I get what Slay was saying though, because you can just picture it at the link if they're at home. The
Three and out.
first 3 and out,
Yeah.
you'd hear it, and fans would be within their right to do it because this offense and the team in general hasn't been very good. But I think there is something to it.
And when the Bucks went up, if they go up 42-3 or something, people might start booing.
Boy, positive thoughts, Rube. Come on. All right, let's go back to Ashley. She's out in the crowd right now. We have another question, I believe, virtually, and
Ashley.
this is presented by Dunkin.
Yeah, another very positive question, guys. Jack Flash 771 on YouTube wants to know, how many of the problems come from mentality or emotions? Is it fair to say the 49ers game broke something in this team?
I think there's something to that. And I think the 49ers game and the Dallas game back-to-back, both those teams were on, long rest, 10 days rest. Neither game was competitive.
Eagles were coming off the Bills game where you said the defense played over 90
Bills
snaps.
games, they played like 95 snaps. I think there's something to that. They haven't been the same since then. And I think that those two games kind of showed the Eagles the disparity between, because they were kind of thinking there's 3 great teams in the NFC, us, the Niners, and the Cowboys. And those 2 games showed that they were on a different level than those two teams. And I think it might have had a damaging effect on them.
And how about the loss at Seattle? Because if you win that game and your defense doesn't give up a 92-yard drive, okay, we're
Well,
coming
Drew
home from
Lock, I
Seattle.
mean, come on
Oh,
now.
Drew Lock, he's Hall of Famer.
Can't be expected to stop Drew Lock.
Oh, or Tyrod Taylor. Oh,
There's
man.
so many what ifs. I mean,
Yeah.
but you are what you are.
Yeah.
But it's still. I think those were 2 big gut punches for sure. Those 2 games. But the thing I still can't understand is how you lose at home to the Arizona Cardinals and lose to the Giants.
You were up 21-6 at
in games
halftime.
that actually, the Arizona game meant a lot to you, and the Giants game, at least for a while, looked like it could mean something too, because the Cowboys were losing down in Washington, and the Eagles showed no fight. They rolled over to 2 inferior teams that, by the way, are sitting on the couch right now, and you're going to the playoffs. Those are games that you had to win, and they won neither of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only person madder than the Eagles in that Arizona game was Monty Ossenfort, the GM of Arizona, going, "No, don't win this game, don't win this game," and that tells you just the stakes were so different for those teams. I think they did get broken a little bit though and I think part of it is the emotional side of it, but I think they just got punched in the mouth by San Francisco, and that came right after playing all those snaps against the Bills. I think that's taken a physical toll, especially we're talking about the pass rush and not getting home. Those guys played a lot in that span. I don't think they've really recovered from it.
Well, I'm going to need you to do back-to-back reps here, Dave. See if you are recovered, because it is time for our RAV4 Things to Know, presented by Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL. Dave Zangaro, take it away.
All right, here are my RAV4 Things to Know. Number one, the Bucs, number 5 in run defense this year. The Eagles, of course, had their biggest game of the season rushing the football, 201 yards back in week 3. The Eagles had 38 minutes of possession in that game. DeAndre Swift went for 130 yards. He hasn't had 100 yards since then, so kind of a big drop-off. Number 2, both Eagles receivers banged up for this game. Devontae Smith has that ankle injury. He is going to play. A.J. Brown with the knee injury. We'll see. He did not practice on Thursday to start the week, so a little precarious situation with him. Jalen Hurts, of course, with the finger. The Bucs don't have a great passing defense, 29th in the league. Can the Eagles be healthy enough to get after that? We'll see. On the other side of the football, Darius Slade, number 3, he will return in this game. The Eagles are going to need him because you have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, even the rookie Trey Palmer, a lot of speed on that side of the football. The Eagles secondary has not been good. Getting Slade back for this game, a big boost. And number 4, we talked about it, guys, the pass rush. Can they get home? I'm not so sure. 70 sacks last year, 43 this year. They went from 1st to 19th in the league in terms of sacks. Hassan Reddick hasn't had one in 4 games. Still leads the Eagles with 11. He has a good matchup in this game. Luke Goedeke, the right tackle. I think if you're looking for the one spot on that line, it's certainly the right side of that Bucs offensive line with Cody Mauch, Luke Goedeke. If they can get after them and they can finally hit Baker Mayfield, they have a chance. If they don't, it might not be a fun game.
Dave Zangaro, RAV4 Things to Know, presented by Toyota. Good job, back-to-back reps. You're not worn down. Now let's
And
go
I'm
back.
on my second RAV4, so back-to-back RAV4s for me.
And Ashley is back there in the crowd, and I believe you have an Eagles fan standing by with you. And, yeah, the shirt lives on here. We're going to get this shirt on the entire hour, I'm feeling.
The shirt don't stop over here. All right, Joe from Roxborough has our next fan question for you guys.
So there was a clear sense of urgency difference between the starters and the subs last week. They're all fighting for jobs, so can you explain that?
I think last week was a weird week because the Eagles tried to tote this line between needing to win, wanting to win, but also resting, and it ended up being a disaster. They would have been better off resting everyone, which coming into the game, I thought you got to play. You have a chance here to win the division. You have to go for it, but it looked like some guys just didn't want to be out there.
Yeah.
And I think that is tough to kind of flip mindsets like that, and it ended up being just a really bad situation.
Yeah, it is really bad that they go into the playoffs without having that kind of win that soothes everybody. It's just, okay, this team is back. So I'm going to ask Rube and Ray, since you guys have covered the Eagles far longer than Dave and I have, can you ever remember a year where the team had expectations through the roof and looked good? Now, I know you say they weren't necessarily a 10-1 team, but there were games they looked good, and there's a lot of talent on the team, but ended the season the way they did, and you're going into the playoffs. I can't remember a time where you're going into the playoffs with this feeling. And, you know, you talk to Eagles fans, and they're already talking about next year in some ways. Can you remember a year where that was the case?
Oh, I can remember very well, 1981.
81.
The year after their first Super Bowl appearance. And there are so many similarities between that year and this year, it's almost eerie. Because the whole offseason was the same thing. Oh, we lost in the Super Bowl, but we're going back. And we're going to go back and we're going to win. That was what everybody said all through the offseason and all through training camp. They started the season off hot, 6-0, jumped way out front. Mid-season, they were 9-2, best record in the NFL. And then it completely fell apart. It's exactly the same thing that happened this year, almost to the week. And then, but because they had the great start, they got to the playoffs. They were a wild card team. They go in at 10-6, and the first game they get a home game at home against the New York Giants and lose. You know, and the feeling going into it was a feeling of dread. It wasn't like, okay, we're fine now. We're in the playoffs. We'll be good. Everybody had the same feeling. At the way the season ended, there was just a bad feeling going into it. And the Eagles fumbled 2 kickoff returns, one in their own end zone that got recovered for a touchdown, and they never recovered. And that was the end. That was the end of the run.
Well, hopefully that doesn't happen.
No, but the parallels between the two are so striking that I can't quite get them out of my mind.
And you witness that.
No, I was I was in high school. I was in college for that. But Jaws talks about that on pregame and postgame all the time.
Really?
The parallels between '81 and this year. It wasn't an Eagles season, but I'm sure Ray remembers the '86 Jets, who were 10-1. Joe Walton's team, and Rich Kotite was the offensive coordinator on that team. Bud Carson was the D coordinator. They were 10-1. They lost their. Not only did they lose their last 5. They lost it by an average of 24.5 points. And, Gaston was hurt. Marty Lyons was hurt. They were expected. They played the Chiefs at home in a wild card game, and nobody expected them to do anything. They won by 20. And actually, I think Joe Walton benched Ken O'Brien.
And played Pat Ryan.
And played Pat Ryan in that game, who would join Kotite in Philly in '91. With mixed results.
I covered the game that started that collapse. They played a Monday night game in the old Orange Bowl against the Dolphins. And the Dolphins, Jets came in 10-1, big favorites. Everybody, this is their year. The Dolphins blew them out, and they never recovered.
Wow.
They never recovered.
But it's interesting because,
and they lost to the Bengals 53-17 the last day of the regular season.
Wow.
And then they went, and not only did they beat the Chiefs by 20, they went to Cleveland, who was the number 1 seed in the AFC the next week, and they played a competitive game. They lost in overtime on a Mark Mosley field goal, but they did find a way to kind of.
But see, that's
I would bring Kotite back as honorary something or other. Oh my
goodness, blasphemous! But that's what's interesting because
I beat Tampa a couple times, my friend.
We left it all out on the field. But when you look at your last column. The last 5 teams that started as good as the Eagles and then lost 5 of 6 or lost 5 in a row to end the season, 3 of those 5 teams won a playoff game.
3 of the 4, with the Eagles being the 5th. Yeah, so 3 of the 4 won a playoff game. So it can happen. It does happen. I mean, because somewhere in there is a good team. Yeah. They just got to figure out how to get it out. And they haven't done that yet.
So I'm going to ask you before we go to another fan, do you have any positive vibes? Do you have a good feeling in any place that the Eagles are going to pull this off?
My left elbow is about it.
One little spot?
I just don't. I
don't?
just, like Ray said, you can't flip the switch. Teams have done it in the past. It is possible. I just don't see any reason to think it can happen with this team and this coaching staff, and as they're currently constructed, I just don't see it happening.
Even seeing the Bucs game last week, 9-0 over the god-awful Panthers.
Yeah. Look at Arizona. I mean, they lost to Arizona at home. They lost to the Giants. These teams are way worse than Tampa. Plus, Tampa's won 5 of their last 6, I believe. Is that right? 5 of the last 6? So they found something that was missing, and the Eagles lost whatever mojo they had.
Yeah. Dave, anywhere, do you have any, Rube had a little elbow?
A little left elbow.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, just because I think on paper, they're a better team. I think they have talent, and like we've been waiting for them to play this perfect game all year. I don't think they're going to play a perfect game, but they play a clean game, and they limit their mistakes. I think there is a chance. But I'll be honest with you, John. I got tricked too many times this year, being too close to the situation. Hearing players talk themselves into it. Jordan Mailata talking about how good the vibes were.
Yeah.
I'll raise my hand. I got tricked by it because
I did too.
I really did feel like a weight was kind of lifted off this team last week, and then they go out and I turn around, they're losing 24-0 to the Giants, and you go, oh, where'd those good vibes go? They left pretty quick. So I'm at the point now where I have to separate myself from hearing whatever they're saying because it doesn't matter. Like, they have to do it on the football field, and if they don't, they're not going to win.
Yeah. Ray?
Yeah, I mean, forget the words, forget what they're saying. I saw Nick this week said something. There's still a lot of belief in that locker room. Well, no. I mean, at this point, they're just saying things. They're grasping for straws. They're looking for anything to try and get this thing turned around. I think that right now, having seen the Bucs and seen the Eagles certainly, I don't think either of these teams are very good right now, and I don't know that either of these teams are capable of going out and winning a game. But I think they're both incredibly capable of losing a game. Okay, and that's what I think this one's going to come down to. I think it's going to come down to which team has the most stupid penalties, which team drops the most passes, which team turns the ball over. That team will lose the game.
And who's been doing that?
And then the other team will advance. And that's been the Eagles.
All right, let's see if anybody out here in the crowd has any more positive vibes. Ashley, do we have a Eagles fan who believes they can go down there and win?
I can.
I have good news for you guys. I have a slightly more positive question, I think. So this one comes from Leslie from Voorhees.
So kind of to piggyback what you guys were saying, if the Eagles were to win in Tampa, what do you think would be the major thing keeping the mojo going? Because it seems like the team's lost the mojo the last 6 weeks, 1-5. Kind of like Austin Powers, we've lost our mojo. So what,
I think just winning a playoff
what
game
can keep us going if we win in Tampa this Monday?
That would
what
get it
can
back.
go forward?
That's all you need. Win a game.
That's what they've said in the locker room. Like, that's all they've needed. Win a game.
And they said that after the
well,
first
they beat
Giants game.
Yeah,
and
they beat the Giants.
A lot of good it did them. But, yeah, I think that would go a long way to getting that mojo back, no matter how it happens, whether it's a fluke play or they pick up a fumble and run it back or whatever it is. If they get out of Raymond James Stadium with a dub, I think it's going to change a lot of things in the NovaCare complex.
Yeah, a win?
Doesn't mean they're going to win the next week, but I think it's going to certainly help.
Yeah, yeah.
The one thing, do we have a moment?
Yeah, let's go. We all
Okay.
have a moment.
We have not really addressed the elephant in the room here, which is the question that everybody's asking. Is the coach's job on the line Monday night? I can't tell you how many people have said to me that, first of all, they would like to see him fired, and then asking the question of, do you think there's a chance that if they go down to Tampa and lose that game, that they might fire the head coach? I would ask these guys because they're down there more than I am, so they have their finger closer to the pulse of this thing. But that is certainly out there. And even though Nick says, I don't thinking about that stuff, you got to be, because enough people are talking about it. I'm just wondering how you guys feel. Is that a possibility?
We spent about 25 minutes talking about that on the last Eagle Eye podcast, and I think it is not because of the losses, but how they lost. I mean, they've been getting embarrassed. The effort hasn't been there. They haven't been competitive for 6 weeks, really. We're talking about a coach who took a team to the Super Bowl last year, and Jeff Lurie's not a guy that makes rash decisions. But if they go down there and it's 30-3 or something, I could very well see that.
Yeah, I think there might be compounding issues because certainly Jeff Lurie doesn't like to get embarrassed. And that's the first thing I've thought when I watch these games. And Ray and I were talking about him walking off the field.
After the Cardinals game, he looked furious.
Just an angry Jeff Lurie. And that's the one thing. He doesn't want to be embarrassed. But I don't know if they get blown out of this game and it's another embarrassing loss, it could happen. Say they lose this game, but they play tough. I think the big issue after that would be, is the vision for the future, do those two visions align? I'm talking about the front office and Nick Sirianni, because when he fired Doug Peterson, he came out and said Doug didn't deserve to be fired, but we differed in the vision for the future. So it could come down to coaching staff. And if Nick has a different view of what his coaching staff should look like going forward, clearly there will be changes, right? But if they can't agree on those changes, that's the kind of stuff that gets coaches fired. That's what got Doug fired before, and I think there could be a divergence there between the coach and the front office.
I just think Nick is different than Doug. I think Doug's a lot more, just a lot more prone to sticking up for what he wants than Nick might be in that situation.
I disagree with that because you go back to building coaching staffs, and maybe on defense, Nick would be like, yeah, let me take your guy. On offense, I'm not so sure. You think about the work that went in for Nick to build this coaching staff. He was way more involved in the hiring process than Doug ever was. It seemed to be something he really cared about. And if we're talking about not just the coaching staff, but offensive vision going forward, if they differ on that, that could be a really big sticking point.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I think that just to wrap up on that point, I find it hard to imagine that he would. But here's the thing: if it were to come to that, and for whatever the reasons they decide we just can't go forward and we're making a change, that would be 4 coaches fired in 11 years. He would have fired 4 coaches, head coaches, in 11 years, and 3 of those coaches took you to a Super Bowl. That's a bad look. That's a bad look for an organization. And I don't know if Jeff...
Andy was 8 years later.
Yeah. I'm talking about from the year he got fired. That if you count it back 11 years,
Right.
if you start the clock there,
Yeah.
that's 4 head coaches fired in 11 years, and 3 of those guys took you to Super Bowls, and this guy took you to the playoffs 3 straight years. I don't know that you can do that unless Monday night is a horrendous embarrassment, national embarrassment, and they have that meeting and they just find out that they're on 2 completely different tracks as far as the team goes. Then you make the change, but the people around the league would just really be rolling their eyes about the Eagles and that kind of a decision. People around the league just would not believe it. Is it possible? It's possible, but it would not go down well with the people.
I wonder how that would affect your ability to bring in coaching talent.
You get on the phone, you're going to have to hire another coach, and what's that guy going to say? Wait a minute, you just fired 4 coaches in 11 years.
I
and
go to
3
the
of them
Super Bowl
won
and get canned the next year. I don't want this job.
Yeah, but the last 2 guys the Eagles hired, no one else wanted them.
That's true, too.
So it's not like Doug Peterson was turning down the job at that point. It's not like Nick Sirianni with his one interview was turning down the job. So if they go in that kind of route again, whoever they want is going to take that job.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, you better win Monday night.
Better win Monday night.
For a million reasons.
You better win. All right, Ashley's standing by with a virtual question. Ashley, presented by Dunkin, by the way.
Yes, thank you to everyone that submitted your fan questions, both virtually and in person, presented by Dunkin. For our final fan question, it's going to be coming from Jason on YouTube. And he says, do you think after this year, our Super Bowl window is in limbo or closing?
I think that the phrase Super Bowl window sometimes is overblown. I think they have some good young talent. I think they have a quarterback in place. So as long as you have some cornerstones, you have a quarterback, you have a chance. They're certainly going to lose some key players here, but then it's really incumbent on Howie to keep replenishing the talent.
You have a really good GM and you have a really good young quarterback. That's going to give you a chance most years.
Yeah. What do you think, Ray?
I think that's probably true. I mean, you're going to have to pretty much rebuild your defense. But I think if the pieces are there on offense, a lot of the questions is, what's your coaching staff going to be? How much of the current staff is going to be back, and is the head coach going to be back? But as long as, in the NFL today, as long as you have an offense and as long as you have a quarterback who can win games for you, you always have a chance.
Well, it's just amazing how this took such a different tone from the middle of the year. Everybody thinking the Eagles could have a long playoff run, thinking, okay, you got the 49ers, the Eagles, and the Cowboys. And it seems the feeling is, even if they win this game at Tampa Bay, that they won't be able to win a game after that. Because you're either going to go on the road at the Cowboys, at the Lions, or possibly the 49ers if there's some upsets. But for the most part, people, it seems like this is as far as they can go. Do you get that feeling that that's the way people are, that's their vibe right now?
Kind of. I think they could go to Detroit and win.
Yeah? Not San Francisco, probably?
No.
Not Dallas, probably?
Dallas could choke.
Yeah?
They've been known to.
Yeah, they have. They have. But I've just seen the last trips that the Eagles have made to Dallas, and none of them have been pretty. Boy, I mean, the Cowboys have just owned
There's
it.
always the Jordan Matthews game.
There's always the Jordan Matthews game. By the way, we're getting some nice gifts here. Rube, you got some a nice drink there at the end. So, by the way, cheers to all the fans here.
Thank you.
All the fans here. I believe. You guys still believe. All right. We want to thank you for coming out and all the people who joined us virtually as well. And this has been Eagles Playoffs Live Q&A presented by Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL. And thank you to Dunkin. Thank you very much to Dunkin for providing signature cocktails right here, and Eagles fans, if you want to enjoy out there as well. So I'll cheers, Ray.
Okay.
I'll cheers.
Happy
the
New
boys.
Year. Can't say it anymore, according to Larry David, but Happy New Year. And cheers. The Eagles are in the playoffs, so at least there's a playoff game come Monday night. Come Monday night.
And
So they have a shot.
And they're favored. They're
They
favored.
are the favorite.
There's
They are the
there's
favorites.
somebody out there that believes in them.
Where was
because-
this optimism in the last 57 minutes? Right.
I mean,
The alcohol got here.
It opened. They opened as 2.5
Ray's
point
hammered.
favorites. It's now up to 3. So somebody believes in them.
Yeah,
Maybe
see?
not anybody sitting here, but there's somebody out there that's willing to bet money on it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to get your final pick before we go. Rube, if you have to, I mean, I don't know if you want to tease ahead to your pick on the website.
I don't think it's a
but-
secret. I mean,
well,
anyone who's
I haven't seen it.
been listening, I just don't. I don't see
Well-
the Eagles winning a game. I don't care who they're playing, and it's not anything to do with Tampa. It's the Eagles. I just don't think they have it in them.
All right. What's your pick?
I think they have a shot to win this game, and you can tell by the way I'm prefacing this that I'm gonna pick the Bucks in this game. I wouldn't pick the Eagles against anyone right now.
Have a couple drinks. We'll see.
We'll see, yeah.
what happens. Ray, what's your pick?
I'm actually going to go the other way.
Oh, he's taking the Eagles.
I'm going to because I think as I said, I don't know that either team's going to win the game, but I think the Buccaneers. I just don't trust Baker Mayfield in his current condition. I think the Eagles are going to pull it off.
There you go. Eagles fans, what do you think of that? Do you believe or no? Okay. All right. And they haven't been drinking at all. Not at all. Thank you, everybody who came out. Thank you very much, everybody. We are at Wicked Wolf. We appreciate you joining us tonight, and catch us on NBC 10 tomorrow night for Road to Victory. Thanks for watching, everybody. And thank you to our sponsors, Toyota and Dunkin. And thanks to Rube, Dave, and the Hall of Famer, Ray Didinger. I'm John Clark. Appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.